give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst, the Draft Act NBA Draft Podcast. My name is Corey Tulliba. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Albert Garbage Time Gim. Albert, what's good, my dude?
Dude, all is good. It is an incredible time to be alive right now. We have the NBA Draft right around the corner, so things literally could not be better in life. And we've got a very special guest joining us today. So with that being said, let me stop talking and let's welcome in our guest.
Yes, sir. We have Ricky O'Donnell, editor and writer at SB Nation. Ricky, thanks for coming to chop it up on the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've been a big fan of No Ceilings throughout this draft cycle. You guys are like the sleeper of this draft cycle. I don't. Were you guys doing coverage last draft cycle? Because I feel like you hit my radar this draft cycle, if nothing else.
That's a very astute observation. We were not doing we were all doing coverage last draft cycle, but we were doing it individually. I mean, Albert and I were doing this podcast together, and I ran a short-lived independent magazine called The Hardwood that I had kind of had a couple of guys who wrote for that, that I had, networked with and that I respected their opinion with, and myself and Tyler Rutger, one of the other guys at No Ceilings, we were talking one day and we were like, man, wouldn't it be easier if we just did this as like a big team instead of like trying to all compete with each other? So through all of the networking we had all done, we decided that we were going to team up and start this Substack where we just bombard people with content and write every day and make it free and do a bunch of podcasts and video and all that. And it's been really cool because it seems as though the response to the No Ceilings content has been really positive for the most part. And much appreciated to everybody, out there who has found us even recently, because it's been, I think it's exceeded our wildest expectations early on.
You guys often make me feel like a piece of garbage because you're just putting out so much content. I'm like, I got to keep up with these guys. They're doing it on the Substack. So, it's been sick watching you guys grow it, and thanks for asking me to be on.
Yeah, well, one of the themes of this particular podcast, it's called the Draft Act NBA Podcast. We like to talk about players' draft stock, and one of the things that we do when we usually break down one specific prospect, and we go, we talk about them for like an hour, and we talk about like all the different mainstream outlets and like where they've ranked them. So we've been, using the SB Nation rankings, your rankings, as one of our, identifiers for where prospects draft stock has been throughout the year. And that was last draft cycle and this draft cycle for the podcast. So, you've been contributing to this podcast unknowingly for about a year.
Well, I haven't really done a big board yet. I've mostly just been doing mock drafts, so it gives me plausible deniability. I can just say like, "Oh, that was a fit," if I fuck something up. So that's the key to long-term success in this industry.
100%. But today we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to touch on a few different prospects, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I figured that we'd start with, you just recently wrote about Patrick Baldwin Jr., and he has most definitely been one of the hardest guys to figure out in this draft because he came into the year a lot like some of the other, like 5 or 6 other prospects as top 10 guys, and just didn't live up to the expectations that we bestowed upon him. And when I watch him, I still want to believe. I really do. Like, even some of the bad stuff, I'm just like, but I see it. Like, I'm trying to look in the crystal ball. It looks good to me. So where do you stand with Patrick Baldwin Jr. now compared to where you stood with him earlier on in the process?
Yeah, I think if you want to like talk yourself into Patrick Baldwin Jr., the best thing to do is to just throw away the Milwaukee tape. Like the Milwaukee thing never happened. He played like 11 or 12 games as it was. He was never really healthy. Obviously, he dislocated the ankle in the second game of his senior year of high school. Tried to come back, I think, a little bit too early by playing FIBA on the U19 team last year that won the gold medal against France. He was solid for that team, but he was never like spectacular. And I think that kind of coming back pretty quickly to play there and just never allowing his body to fully heal. And then like when you get to Milwaukee, everyone's expecting this dude to just like totally dominate what was one of the worst conferences in college basketball. I think Ken Pom had it 22nd or 26th out of 31 or 32 Division I conferences. It was a situation where like they needed a big year from his personal perspective to save his dad's job. So like immediately like huge red flag. Like he's going to this low major conference, but it's not like a Doug McDermott situation where he's going to be like a multi-year player and like grow with his dad.
Yeah.
I'm thinking RJ Hunter as well. How you know his
Bulls
dad
legend.
His dad's at Tulane now, right? Like he was sort of able to like boost his dad's career opportunities and make himself a first rounder. But it was just too big of a gambit for Pat. Like, it's like, dude, you can have a starting spot on the last ever Coach K team, or you could be like the man somewhere else if you don't want to play off Paolo and AJ. But, you know, this is what he wanted to do. I think he viewed it as like, okay, this is the only time in my life I'm ever going to get a chance to play for my dad. Then I'm going to be a professional basketball player for the rest of my youth, basically. And that's going to be like a totally different experience. So I might as well take advantage of the opportunity. But you know, it was just, it seemed like it never had a chance to succeed, given the fact that he was never really healthy and that the team context around him was just absolutely atrocious in like every possible way. So if you want to talk yourself into Patrick Baldwin Jr., and I do, throw out the college tape and just sort of look at what made him an elite prospect in the first place.
If I can really quickly, first off, like I'm totally with you. I think the college stuff, you kind of have to throw it out. But something that you said at the end of your piece when you're talking about how progression is supposed to be linear for top basketball prospects, right? And I think a lot of times we can get into that mindset when we're breaking down draft prospects where we imagine everything's going to be linear with these guys. But something that I wanted to highlight from your piece is you talked about how the measurables were great at the combine, but the testing wasn't so great. Right. His high school tape was awesome and the U19 stuff is awesome, but the college stuff is not too great. And I think that's an interesting thing with Patrick Baldwin Jr., where there are some parts of his game where you're like, yeah, these things are awesome. And then these things are not so awesome. So if we can and just talk about how you project his progression on the next level, do you feel like if you have maybe not a comparison per se, but how do you see him eventually progressing in the league? What's the timeline that you would kind of put on him? Do you think he's going to be a guy that's going to take 3 to 5 years to figure things out? Do you think maybe if he's in the right system, he can contribute from day one? How do you see his progression going with all those different factors?
Yeah, I think in some ways, it sounds ridiculous to say because he was playing in the Horizon League of all places, but like his life in the burden on his shoulders as a player should be lighter in the NBA than it was in college. It sounds totally insane because he was playing for the Milwaukee Panthers, but I guess like when he was going to Milwaukee, everyone like he went there in part, I think, to show that he could be more than a spot up shooter, that like he could sort of, I don't know if I want to say be an offensive engine, but that like he could be a primary offensive option, that he was going to be someone who could create offense, you know, out of isolations and of different play types. And in the NBA, I just think his role is going to be a lot more defined. No one's going to be asking Patrick Baldwin Jr. to like run an isolation or run a pick and roll in the NBA. He's going to be spacing the floor. He's going to be attacking closeouts when he can. And he's going to be flashing, you know, the mid-range game and some of the like high feel stuff that sort of helped stamp him as a top prospect back in high school. So it's interesting. I think like obviously there's a certain like athleticism threshold you need to be an NBA player. And that's my biggest question with him, really. The dude couldn't barely jump over a ruler. He had sub Nikola Vucevic level hops.
Wow.
He had like a 26-inch vertical. So, you know, you just wonder like, and then he was slow too in like all the sprinting testing. You wonder like, where is he really athletically? And I talked to him the day after he did the testing. And he didn't want to make the ankle an excuse. He was saying like, yeah, I'm getting healthier. I'm getting better, but, still not all the way there physically. You just wonder, like, where is he athletically? Because he's definitely huge. And I think, when you look at a guy who's 6'10" and a half, I believe his standing reach off the top of my head is 9'2". I would draw like 9'1", 9'2" as like the line of how big you can be to be a center in the league is with that level of standing reach. So he's gigantic. He's also very slow. And in the NBA, I feel like his role is going to be more defined to like spot up shooter and less about having to like, lift, being the guy who lifts up everyone else around him. I think that was never his game, never the best use of his talent. And, as someone who is in a narrower, more defined role in the league, I think he can be pretty good still.
I think like when we were scouting Patrick Baldwin Jr., like, months and months ago before the season started, we were just watching the tape and we were like, there's no way that this guy is actually like 6'8", like he's listed at or whatever. We're like, he's gigantic. Like he looks so much bigger than everybody on the court. And then when he tested that way, I was like, all right, well, that makes so much sense. And it makes me feel good about, it makes me feel better about his projection, just having massive size. But when I saw the athletic stuff, and maybe it has to do with the ankle injury, I've never watched him on the court and went, I don't think that, like, I never said he's unathletic. Like in an actual basketball context. Maybe I've never been like, athleticism is one of the first things that you talk about with him. But there was always this like inherent smoothness that he played with, where it was like he was born and bred to play basketball and he moves like a basketball player moves, which is like, I don't know, maybe that helps mask some of what I'm missing with his athleticism. But like, as far as what he's doing on the court, like, especially, with a bum ankle, I probably don't want him isolated on Ja Morant, on an island, but I don't know. Is it crazy to not be worried about like his athletic testing numbers? I'm like not really worried about it.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. It sort of depends, like, what role do you see him playing in the NBA, like, defensively, let's say. Yeah. So, like, to me, the best thing he can do defensively is just, like, be big and put his arms up and provide some amount of supplemental rim protection. Now, I don't think you're going to see him in, like, the Robert Williams off-the-ball role where he's, like, the rotational defender blowing stuff up because he's just not that level of athlete to, like, be able to cover ground that quickly. But he's pretty stout towards the rim. No one's going to play him at center, I don't think, because I don't think he's a good enough rebounder to play center. But I think like when he's near the basket, he can contest shots. I do not want him running around screens to try to defend like basically nominal threes who are sliding up to the 4. So you sort of have to like scheme him into a good spot defensively. Now, the beauty of his game is offensively, he has the type of skill set that sort of allows everyone else more room to be the best version of themselves on offense. Like, I think he can fit into a lot of different, he can fit with a lot of different players on offense because he has the off-ball shooting. I think he can, do a little bit in terms of putting the ball on the deck, making a good passing read. So it's interesting, like going back to why I originally was so high on him in this draft class. Like, obviously, the dude has as good of a pedigree as anyone in this class outside of, Paolo and Shep, basically. He was the number 1 recruit over both those guys in this class when he was a sophomore. And even after he had the ankle injury, he still ended as a top 5 recruit. And I think he really started to pop when he was, I keep wanting to say U play because I'm doing a piece on Shaedon Sharpe tomorrow, but it was Phenom U. I'm finally remembering.
Was it the Jalen Johnson team?
Yeah, Jalen Johnson, Reese Beekman. They had a lot of good athletes and a lot of good defenders around him. And he was very much just like able to kind of be the primary scorer without having to be the primary creator. So, I think when you look at his defense, I think being big is probably the best thing he's going to do. Mm-hmm. But offensively, I think he does bring a lot of skills to the table, in part because he's got that size and he's got the shooting stroke.
Yeah, and I think like on both sides of the ball, like he's not like an aggressive player, right? Like he's, like you said, he's not going to be that roving Robert Williams type guy who's just like, let me go and swat this stuff. And I see that with him like on both sides of the ball. Maybe that played into like some of him showing that he's probably not the number one option on a team. But, you know, I kind of think back to last year with Zaire Williams, and who was a guy I was much lower on because, you know, there were times watching his tape at Stanford where I was like, I'm not sure if he can dribble a basketball when he's defended by an athlete. And I was like, you know, I don't know if he's going to return the type of value that you would expect if he selected high, unless he like tries to be more Mikal Bridges than this shot creating isolation step back guy that, you know, maybe you thought he was coming out of Sierra Canyon. And I was, you know, probably right about the role, because I think that he definitely outplayed my expectations this year. But I still see that kind of transition for Patrick Baldwin Jr., where it's like, it's so easy to see him fit with like other guys who can create their own shot and make plays and simplify what he has to do on the court. And to me, like, I still see the fact that he could be a star in that role. And that doesn't mean that, you know, maybe he's going to be an all-star or whatever, but like, he could be a really valuable guy. So I'm just like, what range do you take that guy? Because there are people that are like, you know, a lot of I still think that as a talent, like I would probably say he's a lottery level talent and he can return that value. But from, you know, you hear intel, it's like he might go in the second round. So like, what range do you think is like the appropriate range for a guy with this pedigree who does have these valuable NBA skills, but does have all these question marks?
Yeah, I think like ideally you probably feel most comfortable drafting him if you're a team with multiple picks in the first round. I'm looking at the Grizzlies. I think the Grizzlies pick 22nd and 29th. The Spurs pick 4 times in the top 38, I think. So you have multiple picks. Like, hell yeah, take a flyer on Patrick Baldwin Jr. I mean, he's huge and he should be a very good shooter. Of course, he shot 26% at the college level in a mid-major league. So maybe you could put the shooting under a microscope a little bit, but I did actually look up the numbers provided by Cerebro Sports on his EYBL. His last year of EYBL, in 17 games, he was hitting like 36% of his threes and like 85% of his free throws. So the EYBL shooting numbers are typically like lower than where your baselines would be if you're looking at like college or the NBA. So I think that that's a, you know, especially when you're hitting 85% of your free throws, hopefully you have pretty encouraging shooting numbers. But so I'm thinking a team with, you know, just outside the lottery with multiple picks is probably the best spot for him. Now, I'm in Chicago. I'm a Bulls fan. I think, what do the Bulls need? They need size and shooting. Like, who's got more size and shooting than Patrick Baldwin Jr.? But he's obviously an inherently risky pick. The Bulls pick 18th. I think if they took him, I would be excited about it, but I wouldn't feel a ton of conviction in like, this is definitely going to be a super solid pick moving forward. To me, a little bit of an upside gamble. I mean, he would have to stay healthy, but a team in that range, late teens, outside of the lottery, you know, I don't love this class outside of the lottery in that like, let's say 15 to 24 range. Not particularly my favorite part of this draft class. So like I can easily talk myself into Patrick Baldwin Jr. on the ironclad logic of why not. He shoots it, so it should be fine. Okay. But you know, a lot of it comes down to, can he get healthy and then can he stay healthy? Because when you're having 2 consecutive seasons compromised, and the dude's like 19 years old, it's like your body should not be breaking down at 19 years old, but you know, he doesn't really have a history of durability yet. So in terms of his draft range, ideally, I think Grizzlies at 22 or 29, if he makes it that long, or the Spurs in that range too. Like if you got multiple picks, to me, he's the perfect guy to take.
Really quick, you mentioned the injury history and all that he's gone through the last couple of seasons. And this is more of like a soft data type of question, but I was wondering, with all that he's gone through, his experience at Milwaukee, the U19s, the injury history and all that stuff, from what you heard from him, and I know he spoke to you guys at SB Nation, but was wondering, where do you think he is mentally with everything that he's gone through? And of course, I'm sure he's on Twitter. I'm sure he's on Instagram. I'm sure he's seen the whispers of his stock falling. And I'm sure, you know, after he tested the way that he did at the combine, there might be a lot of different things running through his head. I was wondering, do you have any insight on where he's at mentally confidence-wise, all those things heading into the draft and with all that's going on?
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit about that. So I was going to write about him in November, and that was going to be like the first guy I was going to do a profile on in this draft class. I called him up. I called his high school coach, talked to him, then I got a hold of him before practice one day. And I was excited to talk to him. And then they had a game the day before, and they lost to like Eastern Kentucky. It was the second game of the year or something. I'm like, that's not a good sign. Like, where's this one going? He like did not have a good game in that one. And then I got him for like maybe like 10 minutes or 8 minutes on the phone before practice. And he sounded like he was frustrated with whatever was going on. And now at that point, he didn't suffer like the re-aggravation of the ankle. He did that a couple games later that basically limited his entire freshman season. And then I talked to him a bit at the combine too. And I think, the toughest part was just like he was branded as a top prospect. And then you're seeing all these other guys sort of shoot past him or solidify their status. Like he was supposed to be a peer of Paolo and Chet. He was widely considered to be a better prospect than Jabari Smith Jr. Well, Jabari Smith was sort of able to prove himself at, I think Jabari had a big Pangos camp and, all of these events that Jabari sort of shined at and then had an excellent year at Auburn, obviously. I think Pat thought, this could have been me if I was healthy, but he was just never healthy. So it's a combination, I think, of, just poor team context and maybe trying to get back on the floor a little bit too early. In terms of where he's at mentally, I would think that there's a direct correlation to where he's at physically. Like, how long is that ankle injury going to linger? How long is it going to be a problem? I know so I read an interview he gave with USA Basketball when he made the FIBA U19 team. And in that interview, he's like, yeah, I've re-aggravated the ankle a couple times already. Okay, so that was, well before he went to Milwaukee. So I think that's got to be the hardest part of like, okay, you suffered. First of all, who's even heard of a dislocated ankle? Has anyone heard of that before? Like, you
sprain, fracture,
dislocated. Like, where'd it go? Like, it's your ankle. So I think that took the biggest toll on him mentally. Of not just suffering the injury, but like not being able to get healthy after the injury and seeing everyone else raise their stock. So, only he could really answer that, but I definitely think he was very frustrated.
Now, you mentioned that from Chicago, you're a Bulls fan. I, too, am a Bulls fan. So, if he was available at 18 and the Bulls front office swung that way, I wouldn't be upset personally. And with Arturas having been part of that Denver front office that for years had kind of taken risks on the guys who had high pedigree and dropped a little bit in the draft, I don't know. Could be something there as a guy if he's on the board. Now, you also today released a fun mock draft where it was 2 mock drafts in one. And you basically gave us what the most likely pick is going to be for each team, and then who you believe the best pick would be for each team is, which is a fun wrinkle. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. You have, for the Orlando Magic, the most likely pick, Jabari Smith Jr. We've been hearing a lot of smoke there, right? That he's going to be the guy. But the best pick for the Orlando Magic, in your opinion, is Paolo Banchero, who seemingly feels like is assumed he's going to go 3 to the Rockets. So am I to believe that you think that Paolo is the best fit for Orlando, or do you think he's the best prospect in this class?
I'm going to say both. I've been a Paolo guy from the start of this every year. So I've been covering the NBA draft for a long time at SB Nation. I've been obviously insanely lucky to be able to do it. And actually watching these finals and Wiggins shining in the finals, the first prospect feature I ever did was Andrew Wiggins at the 2013 McDonald's All-American game. So
let's go.
I'm getting old at this point. But one thing I do every year is the day after the draft, I do next year's mock draft, which is just a big board. It's like the top 30 board. I've done this every year since like 2014. And I had Paolo 1, Chet 2 on my preseason board. And I just never really saw enough to pivot off it. I was so close to putting Chet number 1 going into the tournament. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to hold out on it a little bit more. Like, we'll see what happens in March. And in March, I thought Paolo just sort of solidified himself as the top prospect in the class. So in terms of him going to the Magic, I think he's the best player in the class. I do think it's like there's 4 tier 1 prospects in this class. I don't think that he's like in a tier by himself or that he's head and shoulders above everyone else. I got Paolo 1, Chet 2, Ivy 3, Jabari 4. And the reason I have Paolo 1 is because I just put value on shot creation. I think that if you're a bad team and you don't have shot creation, that's the biggest thing you need above anything else. And I look at the Magic and like they got some guys I like for sure in terms of creating shots. Markelle Fultz, it's my guy. Watched him at DeMatha back in the day. That's a long.
I'm with you
there, but Jalen Suggs wasn't the highest on him last year, but good player for sure. He's going to be a good player for a long time. And then you got Cole Anthony, who kind of took a step last year. But I'm not seeing them as a team that like definitely has their primary creator, and that's what I think Paolo can be in a best case scenario. Now, obviously, if he doesn't hit those peak level outcomes, he's probably not as good as a secondary option because like the floor spacing is a little bit of a question mark. The defense, maybe a little bit of a question mark. But 6'10", 250 pounds. The dude has a great handle for someone that size. Very good live dribble passer. I don't really think his skill as a passer shows up statistically. No. I think he only had 17% assist rate this year at Duke. Now, Coach K has committed a lot of crimes against basketball during his time at Duke, and not letting Paolo run any pick and rolls basically was frustrating me throughout the year, not to mention his use of AJ Griffin throughout this year. But
preaching to the choir here.
Dude, I just think like Paolo has the best ability to create shots. He's gigantic. It's 6'10", 250, very strong, has a polished mid-range scoring package. And I just think that like he's going to be able to see over the defense, hit passing angles that other guys can't hit. And then when you think about primary initiators in the league, like none of them are 6'10", 250. So maybe in a sense that could work against him, but like even the big primary initiators are like, 6'7", 6'8", and maybe 220 or 230. So Paolo's just gigantic. Now, he's not super fast. I would say that's like one of the big things limiting him is just like a lack of high-end athleticism. That's why I actually love the idea of him and Jalen Green in Houston. That's like Jalen can just hit the gas and Paolo can be a little bit more of the deliberate playmaker. Now, you probably need three and D guys around him. I don't know if Şengün fits into that long term. But like if you have those two guys as your foundation, I think that's really good. So anyways, I've had Paolo number 1 in this class the whole time. I think it's very close between him and Chet. I love Chet too. I don't want to be branded as a Chet hater just because I don't have number 1. But I think, give me the creator. If you're the Magic, I'm not trusting any of these guys as primary creators. That's just me. And I would go with Paolo because I think he's got the most creation upside.
I definitely agree with you on Orlando. Like, I love Fultz. I mean, it's a shame that he isn't the guy that he showed to be in college because the shiftiness, the athleticism, the body. I mean, the shot making package. It looked like a lock. I do not fault the Sixers for going with him at 1. And I think Franz is fantastic, outplayed his, draft slot this year or his projection where people had him, but I also don't think he's a primary. So Paolo does fit into that. I think the size between Paolo and Franz in the front court and the versatility of those guys to play off each other would be really fun. My thing with Paolo, and I saw him twice this year. I saw him against Kentucky early on in the season, then against Miami in the ACC tournament. And when I saw him up close, I was like, oh my God, he is gigantic. And like, he looks as big as he's listed. Had a good game. He had the cramps or whatever, but other than that, like he showed what I wanted to see. And coming into the year, I was like, I wanted to be in because I'm like 6'10", 250, ball on a string, can shoot it in a variety of ways. Obviously, the shot is a little, needs some tweaks and some consistency issues, but like sometimes it looks really smooth. But like the high school stuff, you're like, all right, sometimes he takes some plays off. And I coached high school basketball for almost 10 years. High school kids sometimes are going to take plays off. Like these guys are not like mature enough to always understand like that coaches want them or need them to go 100. They're literally children. So I was like, all right, let's see. And Paulo's probably still a child, but like, let's see if he goes to Duke, gets the coaching. And there were still a lot of times where I was like, I just wanted to turn the gas on. Like, just please stop taking these possessions off. But then, like in the ACC tournament game that I went to see, I'm like, oh my God, Coach K just ran another double drag with Trevor Keels and Jeremy Roach, and they're ignoring Paulo and AJ completely for 7 possessions in a row. I want to die. Now I get it, Paulo. Like, maybe you're a little frustrated. You're not getting the rock. You don't feel like you're a part of, like, you're just, one of the screeners up top. So I go back and forth because theoretically it's like his scoring package with his playmaking feel at 6'10", and I've been from the beginning been like, I actually think he has some really good defensive instincts when he wants to defend, and he can move well enough at that size that he's basically just devouring smaller guards. But it does come back to, like, is he going to put it together? Is he going to play hard? Because I've seen it 2 levels now where I've had those questions, and it's no guarantee. Is he going to be a guy that maximizes that potential? Whereas, like, I kind of think Chet is going to maximize whatever he has in him. I think Jabari, and I'm also a little bit lower on Jabari than consensus seems to be, but I think that he'll maximize whatever his potential actually is. I don't know if I could say that Paulo will, and that's the only thing that's scaring me. He's my number 2 guy, and by all accounts, in like almost any other circumstance, I think he would be my number 1 guy, but I'm just a little concerned about the effort.
Yeah, like when you were talking about how old he was, I was smiling because my comment was going to be he's old enough to party. And what I would like was can I get some intel on like what's the man behind, like, off the court? What's that like? Because that's a huge part of it, right? Like when you think about the guys who have really maximized their potential or beat their draft slot, thinking like Jimmy Butler obviously is like the Herculean work ethic, but like Draymond too, just like a lot of guys who just maximize every single ounce of their effort. When I think about it with Paulo, I'll frame it like this. I think that like he has the highest upside, in my opinion, to be a primary option, a primary creator. But if he doesn't hit that level, he's probably worse as a role player than everyone else. Like you could see Jabari, like his shooting is going to play anywhere. Like he's already probably one of the best 6'10" plus shooters in the world. He's going to be totally dynamic as a shooter. But, a shooter in the modern NBA, kind of a role player, right? Like the star is the guy who creates the advantage.
Yeah.
And I feel like Paulo has the best opportunity to be the guy who's consistently creating the advantage. Now, he is kind of slow. So, like, when you say he takes plays off, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I just wonder, like, how much of that is because he's just slow. Like, he's not he can't really run backwards, I don't think, very well, and he can't really jump super well. So, I, like, on the high school tape, the reason why I had him number 1 coming into the year is I was watching him on the grind session a little bit post-pandemic. And he was making some really sick defensive rotations. And when you have the size, and I felt like his best attribute coming into the year, and clearly now everyone knows I'm full of shit, was his feel. And I thought that was like evident on both ends of the floor because I thought he was a really sharp rotational defender and could do some stuff as a passer that was really interesting. Not even out of a live dribble, but out of like a standstill passer. So I'm not sure if that level of feel really translated during his time at Duke. I think the athletic limitations sort of did show themselves. And like Paulo doesn't really get that much. Like people will say it with Chet all the time, but Paulo doesn't really get it. But Paulo's just so big and so burly that like he's not very fast. And I think that matters quite a bit. And that's why I do like the pairing with him and Jalen. Like I think that could be really, really fun. But like I get what you're saying about taking plays off. Did you mean that more on the defensive end or the offensive end?
Well, I think offensively, a lot of it had to do with the offense and like college offenses just aren't allowing him to always be the primary creator. Like a lot of times he's like one of the guys standing at the elbow in a horn set. And you're just like, all right, we're going to go to Wendell Moore for running off of whatever. and he's just uninvolved. And like, for me, selfishly, not trying to win college basketball games and trying to evaluate these guys in a pro context, I'm like, I would love to see an AJ Griffin and Paolo pick and roll or something, you know, like that. That would be cool. But defensively, yeah, there were times where I was like, because early on in the year, I was actually like, I actually think he's giving pretty consistent effort defensively. And then I think as the season went on, up until the tournament where he turned it on, and everyone was like, oh yeah, this guy actually is really awesome. Like we forgot. I do feel like he wasn't putting in as much effort. Maybe it's just like, it's a long season. You know, let's just get to the tournament already. But like, whatever the mentality is there, it's not my favorite attribute in a player, you know?
So my only retort to that, and then we can move off onto whatever else, but like, could we say the same thing about peak Luka Doncic and James Harden when they don't have the ball, right? Like sometimes when you're the guy, it's kind of hard to stay engaged when you're off the ball. And also he's not really like a confident and reliable floor spacer in terms of being a catch and shoot option. So
it's fair.
I'm probably being too apologetic for him. This draft class is so fun because like, I feel like everyone's got to plant their flag on who they think is number one.
Yeah.
And I saw Jeremy Woo the other day out at a concert. And I know Jeremy is just like all in on Jabari Smith. And even though I have Jabari fourth, I fucking love that. Like he's just really in on Jabari Smith. And it's like any of these guys could be good. The way I've been framing this draft when I've been doing podcast appearances and radio stuff is like, this kind of reminds me of the 2016 draft when it was Simmons, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown. Now, Simmons just like breaks people's brains and makes people stupid in a variety of different ways because of what's happened with him the last couple of years. But like, he was a 3-time All-Star his first 3 years that he actually played in the league, right? And Jalen obviously has been fucking awesome for the Celtics this year, even though he has limitations, you know. And Ingram, I was an Ingram guy. I was all in on Ingram back in the day. I remember seeing him at the McDonald's game. I'm like, this is my dude. And Ingram was awesome for the Pelicans in the playoffs. So now are any of those guys like franchise level guys? Probably not. They're all like sort of number two, but like to be a really good number two option, you are a very, very good NBA player and you're getting a max contract and you're probably going to make, if you're, you know, a current 19-year-old, you're probably going to make $300 million or whatever. So that's just sort of how I've been like, you know, you could say in the 2016 draft, any of those guys, realistically, you could still argue that, like, who's the best player out of those three? Who would you want out of those three? And that's why I feel like this draft class is kind of cool. So I'm a Paolo guy. I like the creation. I'm a sucker for that, but it'll be fascinating to see how it plays out 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever it is.
Yeah. And, you know, our friend Raphael Barlow made a point, like if you went and read Jason Tatum's scouting report, his college scouting report, you could pretty much just copy paste it. And a lot of it would be Paolo.
That's a good point.
I hated Tatum as a prospect. I was so wrong about Tatum.
Wow.
I did a Facebook video for SB Nation about why Josh Jackson is a better prospect than Jason Tatum. Somehow I still have my job. I shouldn't. They don't pay me to be right, thankfully. But yeah, you know, I think that's Raphael's smarter than me, and that's dead on. I think, you know, it was a lot of like catch and hold stuff. And that to me was the biggest red flag with Paolo early in the year. I'm like, dude, just like make a decision. Like,
get off it. 0.5. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know. I think, you know, maybe just the way NBA offense is played will be more conducive to him making quicker decisions. Where college basketball just like so overcoached and sort of under executed in a lot of ways. And, you know, you wonder if someone like Paolo or guys or like Tatum, guys who are just like bigger and better than everyone, like if that is a little bit of a disadvantage at that level.
So Corey, I don't know if you had another question for the top three guys, but I did want to ask the question that, you know, we both had about the Pistons at 5, because we noticed here that you said for the most likely pick here is Keegan Murray, but your best pick is Jalen Duren. And I think it's a really interesting pick because for me, to see Jalen Duren's name that high on a mock draft or a board is pretty against the grain. It's not something that we see a lot of right now with a lot of evaluators or sites or whatever. So wanted to pick your brain a little bit. It seems like you're a lot higher on Duren than maybe I am or others are. I know Corey loves Duren as well. Not that I hate Duren. I love how it always becomes a thing where if you don't like a guy, then you hate them. Not that at all, but was wondering if we could pick your brain a little bit on Duren and your rationale, or how you feel about him and why you had him that high up on your mock draft.
Well, why wouldn't you love a short center who can't shoot? I just I think the tier 1 of this draft is the top 4 guys to me. In the tier 2, this is where I think it gets interesting. I would go with Duren, Shaedon Sharpe, and AJ Griffin. All 3 of those guys are pretty risky bets. But I think part of it is you got to not be afraid to fail. You got to,
for sure.
Maybe you don't try to hit a single when you got the 5th pick in the draft, dude. Go up there and swing for the fences. So Why do I have those guys as tier 2? Combination of youth, physical tools.
Okay.
And I had another one that I'm blanking on now. But okay, let's just say youth and physical tools. Duren, I like him because obviously super young. He's the youngest American prospect in the class. I really liked Okongwu coming out of USC. And I think that Duren has a lot of the same appeals as Okongwu while just being a way more ferocious athlete.
Agreed.
And dude looks like he's chiseled out of granite.
Right.
He's a straight up man child. His physicality is going to be the one thing that translates right away, despite the fact that he's the youngest American player in the draft. So I think, the defensive versatility is, I would say, what makes him pretty interesting first and foremost. I think that he's going to be able to play a variety of different types of pick and roll coverages. I think with the 7'5" wingspan and with a fucking barrel chest, he's going to be able to be pretty good in a drop, for instance. I also think he's good enough containing ball handlers on the perimeter to get to the level of the screen or even be a switch defender. Now, if either of you guys want to disagree with those 2 assessments, I'm very much open to the fact that my opinion could be wrong there. Trying to grade a college center's ability to defend in space, it can be tricky. I'm saying that I got him 5 because I think he can do it. Now, I might be totally wrong, and he's getting burned off the bounce by Marcus Smart or something, and then it's well, I got that one wrong. But so I think the defensive coverage versatility is the first point, and then offensively, I think that he's just a monster athlete. I wish he would have done the vertical jumping and all that stuff, because he is going to hammer home lobs. I think he's going to have a massive catch radius. He's going to be a monster on the offensive glass. And then I think he's got short roll playmaking ability more so than a lot of guys who are lob catchers. So if your primary thing is a lob threat, not to always bring this back to the Bulls, but I'm thinking Daniel Gafford or someone, you're not typically relying on those guys to be a short roll playmaker, but who can do that, who's also a lob threat, is Rob Williams, and who also has some length. So I don't think that that's a perfect comparison between Rob and between Duren, but it's at least enough of a baseline comparison that I think you could maybe see how that works. And so, I like his defensive versatility. I like the fact that he's super strong. He can jump out of the gym. And I think he can give you some short roll playmaking boosts. And I don't know how much of the EYBL tape you guys watch, because it's funny having 2 EYBL guys in this draft with Sharpe and Duren. Duren was shooting it a little bit too from mid range.
Yeah.
He didn't really do
little
Jermaine
O'Neal turnarounds,
why not? I'm in.
Yeah.
So I got him. That's my tier 2. They could all disappoint, to be sure, but they have the best tools and the best physicality. And this is one of my other points. I tweeted this the other day, but it's when you got the tools, you just have more outs to be a good player.
Yeah.
Wiggins was my example for this. So Wiggins, they put him in the primary scoring role or whatever. And that was just never a natural fit for him. I think because Wiggins isn't a great processor, and he never had a super great handle either. And then for as great of an athlete as he is, he's not very slippery. He's a little bit mechanical as an athlete. But how many guys can as a star, he was like not good enough to be a star. Now that he's a wing stopper, it's like he's insanely overpowered. to be a wing stopper.
Yeah.
Like if I was to ask you guys, like, oh, who's like the best wing stopper in the league coming into the year, you'd probably say, oh, maybe Michael Bridges, best young wing stopper, maybe. But like athletically, between Wiggins and Michael, it's like it's a joke. It's not even close. Wiggins has like turbo boosters on his legs, and Michael's like solid, very good, good athlete all around. But like you can only get an Andrew Wiggins level guy with tools if you got the number one player. So I buy in on the tools. I'm also not afraid. Like I can be wrong. I don't care.
Well,
go ahead.
Here's the thing. Like. And it's so easy for people to like just kind of fall into that consensus groupthink at this time of the year. But go historically, like down the drafts, and like teams don't draft based off mock drafts, and consensus is almost always broken up incredibly early. And then two, like the rankings that you have in consensus never check out when you look back in a redraft in, even like a year down the line, but more so when guys are developed like 5 or 10 years down the line. So one, I love the reasoning behind that tier. Like AJ Griffin is third on my board. Like I look at him, I'm like, one, he had that pedigree coming in. If you watch his high school tape, he would like, to me, I wouldn't have been like, oh, he's going to be the best shooter in the class. I would have been like, he's a like big wing who creates his own shot and gets to the rim and uses his athleticism. And then now it's like, people are like, I don't know if he can get to the rim, and he's a bad athlete. But for me, it's like, for a lot of the reasons I would like I think you would be high on like Jalen Brown as a prospect. To me, like there's like similarities. I see some Jimmy Butler. I see some Jalen Brown in AJ. So like the tools aspect, like, okay, maybe he's not the best wing defender in the class right now, but I know that he has the tools to like, when he's not 18 years old, coming off a COVID season and an injury, I know that he's going to be coachable coming from like, NBA family tree and being the son of a coach. Like I'll bet on his tools over, somebody like in his perceived range, like Malachi Branham, who I just straight up think is like a really bad defender and doesn't have the same tools to one day like recover on that side of the ball. With Duren, I saw him early in the year against Virginia Tech. And in layup lines, I was like, yeah, like this guy windmills, like, looks awesome. And then the game started and I was like, not really the best Jalen Duren performance tonight. He did have one like block. We were like, oh my God, like that is just a pure athleticism thing. But like you said, he should literally just like be recovering from his senior prom and not like getting ready for the NBA draft. And what I love about him is that like he got better throughout the year. Like you saw like early in the year, it was like the classic, like big man with low motor thing was the thing. And then like throughout the year, I don't think you could say that about him. I thought he played consistently hard. I thought his processing got better. He started like becoming a guy who you can make plays out of the short roll. He could, get the ball on the block and find cutters. Like that kind of progress that he made playing a year up while being so young is like truly encouraging. So I do think that like there's, and again, he came into the year, same, like that's the kind of position once he reclassified, like, oh, he might be a top 5 pick. So if he on draft night happened to be a top 5 pick, I would not be shocked, like in the slightest, because I wrote about him early on. I'm like, there's going to be some like GM or owner or whatever that just sees him in a workout, like at the team facility and is like, oh my God, when did we sign this 28-year-old veteran? Like he's an absolute physical marvel to look at. So I could easily see that.
Yeah. My last point on Duren is Memphis had terrible point guard play. Like Lomax, Tyler Harris.
Amani Bates.
Like, that too.
Yikes.
That was the first part of the year.
Yeah.
And he's a player who's going to be pretty like he's not going to create really. Like he needs someone to set him up. So that would be my excuse for him. I think that he looked better as Memphis's point guard play got better, aka Bates wasn't on the team anymore.
Right.
So I don't know. I like him. I got him number 5 on my board.
In your second tier, I think we've done enough on Duren, but I wanted to ask about Sharpe just because Sharpe is a guy who, if we're talking about lottery tickets, it feels like in that tier, or maybe in this whole draft class, he seems to be the ultimate embodiment of a lottery ticket, just because, number one, there's so little film that we have on him, and he just did not play in college. And he's got all those freaky tools that you're looking for. I mean, he's extremely fluid. He's really athletic. The jump shot looks good. So wanted to kind of get your feedback on Sharpe. And I feel like it depends on who you're reading and who you're watching or who you're listening to, but it seems like his stock is literally all over the place. Like he could go in the top 3, top 5, or he can end up in the late lottery. Was wondering, number one, how you feel, and maybe give us a little bit of your evaluation, but also where do you think he's going to end up going? Do you feel like some team high in the lottery is just going to be like, you know what, we're going to give me that golden ticket and let's figure it out? Or do you feel like he might go later?
You could totally see the Kings passing on Ivy to take him, couldn't you? Like, I can. I would not be surprised if that happened.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I think if you're the Pacers, like the Pacers famously don't like to tank, and he's typically the type of prospect you can only get by tanking. So if you're the Pacers, like, do you want a guy who's going to be a little bit safer, like a Mathurin or a Keegan?
Right.
Keegan probably won't even be on the board at 6, the way that it's shaping up.
Agreed.
But like, why not just go for Sharpe? And yeah, I'm gonna publish a piece on Sharpe tomorrow that I still need to finish writing, but mostly done. I'm 2,000 words into it, so I got to be done with it by now. And what's so interesting about Sharpe, I think, is that his entire. So first of all, like we were talking about Patrick Baldwin, like, oh, number 1 as a sophomore, like. In Illinois, Patrick Baldwin was being called the best prospect in the state as an 8th grader. Like, Patrick Baldwin was on the fucking map for a long time. Shaedon Sharpe was not on the map whatsoever. Like, he basically went from unranked, essentially, and not playing at Sunrise Christian. I believe he was on Kennedy Chandler's Sunrise Christian team, to, once the pandemic hit, going to Dream City. And then, like, he had, like, I don't know how many games of solid production there. In the Cerebro Sports database, it's like 12 games. I don't know if it was more than that, if they weren't able to track everything down. And then on the EYBL, he had like, one EYBL session where he was really good, or not session, but like one season where he was really good. And doing some research on him, what I thought was interesting was that he turned down an opportunity to play for Canada in the FIBA contest last year. And like Mathurin was on that team, right? Houston was on that team. I'm like, Shaedon Sharpe, you ever play, bro? Like, when are you playing? Like, all he wants to do is do step backs in an empty gym. And honestly, if I was his advisor, I would say that's what you should do, young man, because he just hasn't had a lot of time as a top prospect. He became a top prospect because he's got the tools. It's just a blind bet on tools in a lot of ways. He basically has an ideal frame for a shooting guard, 6'6", almost 7-foot wingspan. Our boy PD Webb said he invoked the name Vince Carter in talking about his bounce. I mean, he had some extreme bounce around the basket, very good open floor speed, and I'm all in on the shot. I think that he shoots a very soft ball, and I have
effortless.
No concerns that he's going to be hitting nothing but net on his 3-pointers. And then the athleticism translates to space creation on the perimeter too. Like, he's just able to hop into these step backs that like only a teenager in 2022 is hitting this shit. Like, no one else is even trying. Like, how Jordan Poole, sometimes he does like the double step back or the triple step back, and your dad's like, how is this not traveling? And you're trying to explain a gather step, and it's just never going to work. And like, he can do that. Like, he's good at manipulating the gather step to get into multiple step backs, and he's strong enough and has good enough touch to hit those shots. What's weird about his athleticism is it reminds me of AJ a bit, where I'm like, why isn't he a better north-south driver? Now, again, this is me like watching literally like 4 games of EYBL, because there's just not a lot of tape on Sharpe. But he's such a good, tough shot maker, but it's like, dude, you're playing against kids with acne. Like, you should be getting easy looks. You shouldn't be having to settle for like these very difficult shots that you're making. And I used to say that about Anthony Edwards too. But Anthony Edwards in the NBA has just been able to get easier looks by leveraging his immense physical gifts. I do think Edwards is more of like a flexible, bendy athlete than Sharpe has shown himself to be at this point, and certainly more than like AJ Griffin has shown himself to be. But I think that's what's so interesting about Sharpe is like he's definitely got the tools, he's got the shooting touch. His process to me is a huge question mark, but his process is a question mark because he hasn't played. Like he barely, like the pandemic interrupted the development for all these guys. So that's something that just has to be reckoned with in terms of like it wiped out an EYBL, like an AAU grassroots season. And it wiped out, a lot of a high school season for some of these guys. So like, how do you develop process? I would think it's just by playing
reps.
And, probably Shaedon Sharpe, like put him in the G League, probably. But also, like, if you were the Pacers and you were just like, actually, you're just going to be an off-ball shooter and we're going to make you use those tools on defense, like, which no one's ever done because he's such a gifted scorer. But it's like, he's such a ball of clay that, like, in my article, I was trying to say, like, he can be whatever you want him to be just because he's got the tools to do it and he's got the youth. So I think I would, again, I come back to my fuck it, why not logic when it comes to Shaedon Sharpe, but it's like, why not? I don't know. You can see a situation where passing on him is just as risky as taking him, right? Like, so
for sure.
I think like you said, like he just needs reps. Like that's the only way for him to better his weaknesses, because like when I watch his games, I'm like, all right, one, like when you're like, I don't know why he's not getting downhill more. It's because fucking high school kids love taking jump shots. Like they just, if they can create space and get to a jump shot, it's just like they like doing that a lot more than constantly attacking and having to like go into the lane and get hit by somebody and draw a foul. Like it's just like I think a young person's mentality. But like as far as like the other weaknesses, it's like, how is he improving his playmaking in an empty gym setting, like during workouts and stuff, right? Because right now he's very much like a one pass away guy. He's not a guy who is like, creating opportunities. He's not coming off a ball screen and doing the Luka Trey, like weak side hit after shifting the low man type thing. He's not doing that stuff. It's like, I can't get a shot. That guy is close to me. Let me pass. And that's also like when you bring up Indiana, like I'm a big proponent of like they're like a great spot for him because they have Halliburton to do the high level stuff. And it's an easy transition for him. Even Detroit with Cade, like to just go in and be like, hey, go be an athlete, knock down shots, create a bucket when you have the opportunity. And like you said, like defend and show the willingness to defend and use your tools. Even if the process isn't perfect on defense, like just go put effort in. Do you have like, who's your favorite sleeper in this draft?
That's a good question. I knew you were going to ask that, so I was trying to come up with some guys. How deep of sleepers do you want here? Does it matter? I can just say whoever.
Say who whatever your heart is feeling right now.
Okay. I mean, I'm in on Dalen Terry. I feel like everyone's in on Dalen Terry, but I was in on him for most of the year. I picked Arizona to win the tournament. That didn't go very well.
Same.
But I just like Dalen Terry as your fifth option on offense. Like the thing about him is he's such a low usage offensive player, but he has a lot of like connective skills. And when I was doing that like best pick mock draft, I put him to the Rockets at 17, even though that seems like way earlier than most people would take him. But it's like, I don't know, if I'm building a team around Paolo and Jalen Green, like I need some guys who are just going to defend, be rangy, be switchable, and pass the ball and be able to hit a spot up. And the spot up is the question mark with him, I think. But I believe in the shot enough to draft him, I think, in the mid to probably late first round. And then, he seems like such a good passer, and he was a good passer, but I feel like the synergy numbers on him were not good. I haven't looked at him in a minute, but I believe they were like, he was like sub 20 percentile in pick and roll playmaking, which surprised me because he seems like a very good passer to me. Another thing I like about him and what I want in a wing defender, I think this is a sort of a secret ingredient to Mikal Bridges being so good, is that he's really good in transition. And Dalen Terry's really good in transition too. Like he's able to get the pick sixes, sure, but also just like filling the lane on the break and being able to finish when he does that. So
Yes.
I like Dalen Terry. Like I don't know how much upside he has really because he's such a low usage player. And like part of upside is being able to operate with the ball or like, being a guy who's involved often in the offensive plays. But yeah, so that's the first guy I'll name. And then
Well, let's stick with Dalen for a second because I
Yes,
know
please.
that's Albert's favorite, I think, player in the
Cool.
draft. Two, like, you're talking about like upside and stuff. I was talking, I don't know, it's probably like early March or so, and I was talking to a scout in the league, and I'm seeing the success of like Lonzo Ball. I thought Derek White, like just one of these, like you said, like connecty guys. And I'm like starting to watch Terry a little bit more. And I'm like, what are we thinking? Is he staying at Arizona? Is he going to come out? And he's like, well, I don't know. From everything I'm hearing, the plan is to stay another year. I doubt he's going to. Low key, I think he's Arizona's best prospect. And I was like,
who
that's
was telling you
interesting.
that?
A scout in the league. And I was like, that's interesting. And, I think that's probably, a little bit of a controversial take given how a lot of people feel about Mathurin.
Yeah.
But look at the success of guys that are like 6'7" and could pass the ball. And I mean, I don't know what the synergy numbers are, but if you're watching his film and you think he's a bad passer, I think you're a crazy person. The timing and touch and feel he has, like hitting guy like cutters, and phenomenal. And the switchability, like the length, like that, to me, he's the modern NBA. And also, like, his vibes are crazy. Like, his personality is just everything you want, like, in a guy who's going to be a lead ball handler. So I love that. And I was asking this person this because I was like, is he going to be like a guy that if he goes in the draft, like, is he going to be a guy that the Bulls, it wouldn't be crazy if the Bulls took him, which was my mindset for that. And I don't think now, as we get, approach the draft, we're about a week away, I don't think it's as crazy. But Albert, you opine about Dalen Terry quickly.
So, okay, first off, thank you. I'm just so happy because we're getting so tight and so close to the draft that we're probably not going to be able to do a Dalen Terry episode. So I've just been waiting for months to talk about Dalen Terry, and now is my moment, and we're here. I got to watch Dalen Terry twice, and especially during the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas. And when Kriisa went down and the next game, like, Terry was given a bunch of the playmaking duties, like, you could see that the guy was absolutely electric. And, that carried over into the tournament. And just when you go back and watch his tape, there's so much to like about the guy. And the biggest thing with him is, Corey, you mentioned the vibes. It is so freaking palpable with him. Like, I was in the building and the whole building was reacting to every single thing he was doing. It was like Maximus in Gladiator, right? When he does the whole, are you not entertained and all that stuff. Like, the crowd just ate him up. And that's the thing with Terry that I absolutely love. It's the competitive spirit that he has, that he plays with, the chemistry that he had with his teammates, whether it was Kyer or Mathurin or Tabellis or Koloko. He just had this ESP unbelievable connection with all his teammates, and the passes that he was throwing all over the court were just unbelievable. So for me, I love Terry, and I absolutely, everything that you guys said, I agree with. Defensively too, I think he's just going to grow into that body, and he's going to be 6'7" with over a 7-foot wingspan and just be jacked in a couple of years and be unbelievable on that side. So I think he's going to be great. And I'm going to say something crazy that people may hate me for and may give me crap for, but I think the Knicks should take him 11, and the Knicks should feel absolutely fine about it. And people, I know Knicks Twitter won't like it because they're going to be like, who the hell is Dalen Terry? Because all they're thinking about right now is like Tari Eason and Benedict Mathurin and AJ Griffin. But if the Knicks took Dalen Terry at 11, he would give them something that they just don't have from any of their wings, and that's versatility. He's going to be able to play make. He's going to be able to run and push things in transition. I think the shooting will come. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think the Knicks should take him, and people are going to hate me for it, but it's okay. And I want to put that in the world because I think it'd be awesome.
You're on the record.
I guess the question with him is like, does he have enough scoring gravity to unlock the playmaking? Is he going to put enough pressure on the defense as a scorer? I don't know. Like, do you guys have any takes on his floater? To me, he's a guy who needs a floater.
I actually do have a take on his floater because I was focused on it today for another podcast that I was on. And I was like, I feel like he has great touch, but he misses them. So I was like, that puts me in a precarious position to choose a side because I feel optimistic about it, but I feel like the evidence is telling me I shouldn't. But I think that's the beauty in watching film and not like putting a hard cap on, a specific skill set, because at his height, I agree. I think it's such an important shot for him coming off of a ball screen. You see what it does for a guy like Dyson Daniels, who I think if you were comparing like skill set for skill set, like that's probably the guy in this specific draft you would probably like tall, multi-tool, maybe no like specific standout skill, versatile, blah, blah, blah. And you see what it does for Daniels. So I think it's got to get better, but like I'm pretty optimistic about it.
Agreed. And I feel also that he didn't get the same amount of minutes as some of these other guys. And I feel like more volume, more time, I think it'll be there. I'm a believer. He especially shot the ball well coming down the stretch at the end of the season from 3. So I think there's a lot to like there. And obviously I'm a Simmons guy, and I love what Simmons says all the time when he says, like, I want guys who are going to compete and are going to work on their craft. And I feel like Terry's that level of a competitor. I think he's going to be a sicko. I think he's going to live in the gym. He's only going to get better. I've talked a bunch to, different people, and I just think it's there. The makeup is there. The energy is there. The desire is there. And like you said, right, maybe he's not a plus athlete, but I love the measurables on him. I love the IQ on him. So I'm a believer. Obviously, I'm not saying he should ever be a number 1 option. I don't think it's ever going to get to that point, but I think he's going to offer enough. And I think his passing is such a threat, and it's so crafty and smart that it'll open things up for him, even if they don't believe in the shot, if that makes sense.
Did you guys see the trade that just went down? It's in the comments. The comments broke the trade.
God.
Dallas, 26.
Really?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Christian Wood to Dallas for 26. So the Rockets have 3, 17, 20. Are we thinking a 17, 26 package to trade up now? What's your initial reaction to that?
Well, I guess my first thought is that the 26th pick in the draft is not a lot to give up for Christian Wood. That seems like, just on aggregate of talent, a pretty good return for Dallas.
Yeah.
I feel like Houston probably could have gotten a better pick, probably, but I don't know. Who knows? And then I'm thinking, like, how does Christian Wood pair with Luka?
Yeah.
With Luka, I probably want like defenders. Christian Wood. I would say that Christian Wood is not a good defender. Is anyone going to disagree with me on that?
No, I'm not a Christian Wood guy.
Me
but
either.
He's talented.
Yeah.
I think Luka's going to make his life easy. I mean, I don't know him personally. I've never interacted with him. I haven't heard great things. It doesn't seem like, he's the best chemistry guy. And I think Luka is kind of a hard ass in that regard. So I'm interested to see that dynamic. But I think theoretically the offense should be pretty intriguing.
What is he giving them, I guess, that they identified that they needed in the playoffs? Like in the playoffs, it was like, okay, they need a real center. But like, okay, is he going to be their small ball 5? Like, I don't know if he has the chops defensively to be able to tie those lineups together. I don't know. But also, like, you're trading the 26th pick for a really talented scorer, and Luka will probably make him an even better scorer. So it's an interesting trade. I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up since it just went down.
It's certainly I think it's a good swing. It's a good swing, especially for a team like Dallas, who, like, what are they getting out of the 26th pick?
Yeah.
Like, they probably think, like, we're close to a championship. We have a potentially all-time player. Let's, try to expedite this thing. We don't need this draft pick. So,
and I don't know what his contract situation is. This might be the last year of his deal, because didn't he sign sort of a short-term deal?
And it's cheap too. It's pretty cheap for him, right?
I was also thinking, like, you could probably pivot off him and he'll still have value, even if it doesn't end up being a perfect fit. So figured I should mention that. Chat had it first.
Shout out to the chat. Shout out to Mr. Ray. Mino F. Everyone Needs a Smile. Ryan Gibbs. Matt T. I Make Music. Steve Kang said Albert's looking like a whole meal on camera. If you're in the chat and you're watching, make sure you're smashing that like button, doing your thing on the channel, giving it a share. Ricky, we appreciate you taking the time to come chop it up with us, man. This was a lot of fun. So before you go, please tell the people like where they could find you and the pieces that you've been working on and that you just kind of came out with, so they can go and find that, because you've been putting out good stuff, as you said, since Andrew Wiggins was a McDonald's All-American.
Yeah, you can find all my work at sbnation.com, usually on the front page or the NBA page. And yeah, I've done in this class, I did the Patrick Baldwin profile we talked about. I've done pretty comprehensive scouting reports on my top 3 players, which is Paolo, Chet, and Jaden Ivey. I'll have a Shaedon Sharpe piece tomorrow. I got to finish that. And I'm already starting to think about the 2023 board, because I do that after the draft every year. Wow. And then this year I'm thinking, like, who are the top returners outside of Turk Smith from NC State? I'm having a real hard time identifying the top returners this year. It's going to be a weird next draft because the top guys aren't in college. We're going to have 2 overtime elite guys. We're going to have, Wembanyama playing in France, Scoop playing in the G League. And part of me is getting a little sad about that. I'm like, man, this past year was fun because we had like the best prospects playing at the biggest programs. And I guess if you're a college basketball fan, you get annoyed with the best players going to Duke every year or whatever. But like that just makes it more convenient and easier for me. So I actually like that. Like they can all go to Duke or Kentucky. They're going to be on ESPN and it's going to be chill. So next year is going to be pretty fun and interesting draft class. I think super talented at the top. And yeah, you can find all my work at sbnation.com.
I think my favorite returner is Arthur Kaluma, maybe.
Solid, yeah. That's a good pick.
Kevin McCullough, shout out. Mike Miles, that's my guy. All right. That's going to do it for another episode of the Draft Act NBA Draft Podcast. Albert, tell people where they can find you on the World Wide Web.
You can find me at Alberto Gim on Twitter is where you can find me, and doing stuff for No Ceilings is where I'm at.
Yes, sir. We're full steam ahead. NoCeilingsNBA.com. Subscribe. It's free content Monday through Friday, delivered directly to your inbox. There's no effort. You don't even have to, type in a URL to get there. It's coming to you. We're, we're doing it. We've made it this far. The grind is almost over, but it will start again. For Ricky, it's going to start the day after as he releases his 2023 mock. Until that time, y'all, we out. Thanks for rocking with us. Peace.
Peace.